Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our study of the book of Psalms. Today we are in Psalm 11. And in this psalm, it's a very short psalm, but you have this question of trust, and that really becomes the theme of the psalm. And so as you examine this psalm today, consider it from the standpoint of the question of how much we trust God. Let's look at what the psalmist writes in Psalm 11. Beginning in verse 1, we read, "In the Lord I put my trust. How can you say to my soul, flee as a bird to your mountain? For look, the wicked bend their bow, they make ready their arrow on the string, that they may shoot secretly at the upright in heart. If the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? The Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord's throne is in heaven. His eyes behold, his eyelids test the sons of men. The Lord tests the righteous, but the wicked and the one who loves violence his soul hates. Upon the wicked he will rain coals. Fire and brimstone and a burning wind shall be the portion of their cup. For the Lord is righteous. He loves the righteous. His countenance beholds the upright." Here in this short psalm, you have the question of trust, and it's actually going to be broken up. The psalm's going to be broken up into two different parts. The first is the question, and the second is the answer. So, as we look at our thoughts from the psalm this morning, let's start by looking at the question, because the question is one of fleeing. And why would I flee? Or how would I flee? In verse 1, it says, "In the Lord I put my trust. How can you say to my soul, flee as a bird to your mountain?" And so you have this level, to some degree, of incredulity by the psalmist. On the one hand, he says, I put my trust in God. But then he asks God, so how can you say to my soul, flee as a bird to your mountain? The idea here is one of running away and hiding, as it were, and letting God take care of it. Or not trying to take care of everything ourselves and letting God be the one who does the dirty work, so to speak, who is the one who intercedes in this particular area. And yet at the same time, he says, how can I be asked to do this when my enemies bend their bow, they make ready their arrow on the string, that they may shoot secretly at the upright in heart? In other words, they're standing here waiting to destroy me, and you want me to just step back and let you take it. If the foundations are destroyed, then what can the righteous do? In other words, if everything falls apart, what are the righteous supposed to do in this particular situation? You'll notice that in these first three verses, you have a level of fear, you have a level of uncertainty that is involved, and the psalmist is trying to figure out in this first half, while I say I put my trust in God, that puts things out of my control. And how does that work out for the best? The answer is in the last half of the psalm, because there the psalmist begins in verse 4 and he says, "The Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord's throne is in heaven. His eyes behold, his eyelids test the sons of men." The Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord's throne is in heaven. The Lord is above. And the principle of what is being discussed there by that statement is the fact that he sees what is going on far better than I do. He understands what is going on far better than I do. And so because of that, you have a setting in which the one with the imperfect information, which is man, is looking at the one who has the perfect information for help. And while we may not understand why God says, sit back and let me take care of it, or flee as a bird to your mountain, you have, on the other hand, the recognition that God knows what He's doing, and He also knows how to handle the situation and how to deal with the wicked. And so you're dealing here with the righteous. You're dealing here with those who are willing, as the first statement of the psalm says, to put their trust in God. But then you have this statement at the end of verse 4 and going into verse 5 that is interesting, and to many people it is perplexing. Because it says, his eyelids test the sons of men, and the Lord tests the righteous, but the wicked and the one who loves violence his soul hates. And people will automatically go in their minds to the passage in James chapter 1 that talks about when you are tempted. Do not say that you are tempted by God, for God does not tempt any man. And yet we need to understand the difference between a temptation and a test. A temptation is what God, would imply that God is trying to get us to do something wrong. He is placing something before us to see if we will do the wrong thing, if we will take the wrong steps, if we will follow Satan instead of Him. But a test is something different. We give tests all the time. Tests are a measure of our knowledge and our understanding and the way that those things have embedded in our minds, in our dedication. There are several places where you talk about tests being laid before men. You can think maybe most visually of all of Genesis chapter 22, where God tells Abraham to go and to sacrifice his son Isaac. God has no intentions of actually allowing Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, but He wants to see if Abraham trusts Him enough to do whatever He commands him to do. And when Abraham does, God stops him and says, now I know that your trust is in me. When you see the things that transpire, God allows our faith to be tested. God allows our faith to have to go through the struggle of, are we going to put our trust in Him? You know, just a few verses earlier in James chapter 1, it talks about that the testing of our faith brings about endurance. It is what allows us to be able to continue on with certainty. And it is what shows us that things will work out, that God will take care of us, that we can continue to put our trust in Him. And so what you really have with this testing of the righteous is it's the very same way that we test our children in school in the various subjects that they take. It is to see if they have brought in and if they understand the information that they've been given and if they're putting it to use. God does the same thing for us. We face tests in our life of where our faith and trust really are. You remember the statement of verse 1. It's the core of everything that is stated here in Psalm 11. I will put my trust in the Lord. Is that where our trust is? We may not always understand why God says do it this way. We may not always understand why God says we can't go after this route, we have to go after this one. But do we trust God enough to recognize that He has our best interests at heart and that His desire is for us to be safe with Him? These are the things that I found in Psalm 11. I hope that they are valuable and helpful to you. Next time we will come back and we will begin looking at Psalm 12. I hope that you will join us then. But until then, Have a great day.